And for those of you who may be new to Insight LA today, we divide our time roughly into thirds. We're going to do some meditation momentarily, and then have some teaching, and then some chance for interactive connection. So maybe turn off my phone. And if you see me moving around, I'm sitting on an exercise ball in the guest room where we're staying. I do have some flowers, but I'm not sure. There, you can see them a little bit in the background. There. Those flowers are for you, in honor of you. So I'm speaking to you actually from Europe. As I said, we left Oslo, and we are on our way to a wonderful long-time Insight LA practitioner's wedding in Greece. She's Greek. Her name is Athena. If you've ever been in the Deepening Your Practice group that meets on Thursday mornings, then you know Athena. And she's going to have a Greek Orthodox wedding for her family and Greek friends, but then she also wants to have a partly American ceremony, have the two together, and because she's marrying an American man, and Brian, and so I'm going to help officiate for the American part of the wedding, and I'm looking forward to that. Anyway, so let's sit together. You are free to have your cameras on or off while we meditate. I'd love to see you when we're not meditating. It can be distracting when we're meditating. And I will do, it's maybe somewhat of a contemplation today in honor of Father's Day. So finding a good frame for your body where you can sit comfortably for roughly a half hour, and either closing your eyes if that's comfortable for you, or just lowering your gaze. I always like to begin with 3 cleansing breaths. So taking a deep breath in and releasing. And one more time, breathing in and relaxing with the out breath. And one more time, a deep breath in and relaxing with the out breath. And just taking a moment to be grounded in your body. Letting the breath flow in its own natural rhythm. Appreciating that the breath is breathing you, that you don't have to make it happen. Just bringing attention to it. And feeling the movement of the breath in the body. The sensations in the body. And the sounds of life around you. And then you may notice a bird chirping outside the window here. I can't hear your sounds, but the great thing about sound as a meditation subject is that, like sensations, like the breath, they're only happening in the present moment. We don't hear yesterday's sounds or tomorrow's. And so I'm inviting you to a contemplation in honor of Father's Day. And you can always just tune out my voice and do your own practice, whatever feels right to you. But I want to honor just the whole spectrum of experience and feelings that surround these kinds of days. So this is a day to honor fathers, stepfathers, father figures in your lives. Just calling to mind those who have loved, supported, encouraged you, taught you things that you then can share with others. And just sending some warmth their way if you have such figures in your life. And today is also a day to acknowledge and celebrate the goodness of father mentors, but also to mourn the loss of a father or never having had a good father. Just bringing some tenderness to your heart that may have been bruised by losing a father or never having had one to begin with. We offer self-compassion and love to all those who have lost a father and to all fathers who have lost a child, whether by death or by alienation or estrangement. And opening our hearts to support those who don't think of Fathers or Father's Day as any kind of celebration, but for whom it brings pain and sorrow. Everyone who suffered abandonment, neglect, or abuse from a father or father figure. And offering some compassion for fathers who were so deeply conditioned to be providers, breadwinners, that they missed out, on the childhood of their children. So this is a metta, a metta or loving kindness practice, where we first offer metta, send our love to the ones who are easy to love, the fathers and father figures in our lives who have loved and supported and encouraged and taught generously. And if you are a father, offering some love and appreciation to yourself. Offering loving kindness to all the fathers in our midst who give so generously of themselves to their children. Offering loving kindness to all the men who choose not to have children, but who are present in caring and supportive ways to children, youth, and parents alike. And once again, sending compassion to all those for whom this day is actually painful or sad for whatever reasons. Mourning a loss, mourning a painful childhood, whatever it may be. We send our caring and loving kindness. And offering some loving kindness to yourself, wherever you may locate yourself across all these experiences. And just sensing and feeling the tenderness and the compassion that embraces our hearts in this silence and stillness. Ding. Yeah, thank you to those of you who have turned the cameras back on. I appreciate it. Um, so nice to see you all. Yeah, so I wanted to do a kind of a meditation for Father's Day that would include as many of the different kinds of experiences that I could think of that collectively we might have had with the fathers in our lives, and to acknowledge the losses of so many different kinds that can happen, or this relationship. Oops, see, this light keeps falling off. It attaches to my computer like this. Yeah. And it's getting dark here. And one of the curiosities of the friends we're staying with is that I can see it. I don't know if you can see it. That the lights are all just like one little light bulb hanging in the rooms. They don't like brightness. Once it gets dark, they're living very much sort of in tune with the seasons. So this might just keep falling down, but I'll just keep putting it back up. Okay. Okay. Because it stays light much later here, because I guess we're further north in Europe and warmed by the Gulf Stream. It does stay, but it's getting sort of twilighty now. So, and I don't have another light in this room. So just bear with me. Falls down. And putting it up. Yes, it does. It does feel calmer to have dim light in the house. That's true. I kind of like it. So another thing that I wanted to mention in relation to Father's Day is just to give a huge bow of appreciation to the fathers who are really fathers of humanity. You know, the fathers who care about the whole of humanity. You know, people like their own heroes in that way, but they're people who are our ancestors, people who are visionaries, fathers to the world. I think of them that way. You know, people like Thich Nhat Hanh, Martin Luther King, Bhikkhu Bodhi, Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, the people who really embody the compassion that the world needs so badly right now. Ethe, can you mute yourself? Thank you. The compassion that the world needs so badly, and the compassion that really is the most important thing for our world. And I'll tell you where I'm coming from when I say that. Generally, it's true, but also specifically having been at this global, it's called the Oslo Freedom Forum, and it's a global conference for activists internationally who come and share their stories. And it's incredibly inspiring, but also incredibly heartbreaking. And it just becomes clear that this is what we need in the world right now. And one of the most important things about the practice that we do together is realizing that our minds and hearts can be trained. As Joan Baez always said, just as people can be taught to kill in the military, they can be taught how to love. And that's the power and the intention that we have as practitioners of these teachings together. And why do I say that compassion is the most important thing in the world right now? Is because with compassion, we could really end violence in all forms. We could, it's really the antidote to all the problems of the world, that if humans would nurture and train their hearts in compassion, We could end all the injustices that exist in economics and politics and race and gender and environment, all the creatures of the earth and society. And the good news, of course, is that compassion can be learned and trained and strengthened in our hearts and through practice. Just that simple, through practice. And I don't know what bothers you most about the world as it is and how the world seems to work these days, but it's worth reflecting on. So at the Oslo conference, there were about 1,000 people there, and those who took the stage were activists who essentially risked their lives to promote freedom and justice for people who are their people who are living under repressive regimes, authoritarian regimes, or totalitarian regimes, dictatorships, which are unfortunately on the rise across the globe. And many of them were the victim of a very favorite tool of dictators, which is called arbitrary detention, where people get imprisoned and often tortured without having committed any crime. But the supposed crime that they've committed is being critical of their government or trying to work for more justice in a country that does not have the rule of law. And we just met so many inspiring people, and I'll just tell you about a few of them. I mean, it's sort of like where to begin, but, and why Jack and I were there, we were invited to offer some practices of steadying the heart to some of the younger activists who are in a fellows program, where for the first time this year, there was a focus on mental well-being. Oh, Claire, I'm sorry. Okay, well, come back next week. For the first time at this conference, there was a focus on well-being for the activists. It was called mental health, but mental health has unfortunate associations in many, many countries where mental health is stigmatized. It means if you go see a therapist, it means you're completely crazy. I mean, there's stigma in our country too, but it's a lot worse in some other places. But so our job was to just offer some practices to help the activists sustain their work and not get completely burned out. And it's interesting because it was very, very hard for the activists to shine this passion for, having a better world, and the really intense dedication that they have to turn that light and shine it a little bit on themselves. They all tend to feel guilty, like they're not doing enough. I mean, we know those feelings too, but they're doing so much, right? And maybe you are too. But so one of the women that Jack and I actually worked with the fellows was a therapist from Somalia. Jack gave a talk at a breakout group with Layla, this therapist from Somalia. Layla Hussein is her name. And she told the story of just her own story. She's a great therapist, and she was teaching all kinds of great things to the activists. But she also told her own story, which is that when she was 7 years old, she was trapped by her mother and the female relatives that she loved and trusted. And they held her down, and she suffered female genital mutilation. And she has started a nonprofit called Girls' Generation to fight this and she doesn't soft pedal it by calling it female genital cutting. She calls it female genital mutilation. And I'm sorry to talk about this if it's triggering for you, but it's still going on in lots of parts of the world where really every few seconds a girl suffers this. So she's dedicating her work to changing that. There was an a Nicaraguan man, Felix Moriaga, who had run for president against the dictator Daniel Ortiz in Nicaragua. And he, prominent academic, prominent person politically in the country, but when he ran for president against the dictator, he had a lot of support. And for that, he was imprisoned and tortured. He was imprisoned for 3 years. And what was so beautiful is that we saw a video of him being released from prison and meeting his daughter and his wife, being brought back to them, and just the joy of that reunion. And at the conference, his daughter, I don't know how old she was, maybe 9 at that point, stood on the stage, and he thanked her for keeping him alive while he was in prison. And I'm posting a little clip of video on my Instagram of what she says to him, how much she loves him and free Nicaragua. It was just very uplifting and beautiful to see them together on a stage. There was a Malagasy, that's from Madagascar, judge, a woman who is the first judge ever to have resigned in protest of political interference in the judiciary in her country. We know something about that in our country as well. And there were people from Ukraine, there were people from Belarus, there were people, I guess the hardest thing were 2 Uyghur women who, I don't know how they escaped, talked about what it was like for the Uyghur people who are incarcerated in concentration camps in China. And I mean, I'm going to stop because it's a lot to take in. It was a lot to take in. It was very interesting. I learned so much. One of the things I learned is that for most of the countries who were represented there, this war in Ukraine is not, it's a hugely symbolic war. It's not really presented so much that way to us, but they really see it as a war against dictatorship and authoritarian regime in the world, and that it's very symbolic and very important that if this war is lost, it feels like an immense loss to all of the people who are living in repressive regimes and hoping for change. And they say, dictatorships have been around for thousands of years. It's not a new form of government, but that doesn't mean that it can't be changed. And mindfulness it really shows us that, the world may be rife with all these crazy disparities I was mentioning before around gender and race and economics and healthcare and education and elections and nationalism and all the rest of it, people deprived of food, of education, of clean water, of safe living spaces, of healthcare, but the world doesn't need to be this way. It doesn't have to be this way. And we have to hope, we really have to hold hope that it doesn't have to be this way, and that our practice and how we hold ourselves and each other in our hearts is important in changing this. Having the solidarity. All the activists talked about what they really cared about and why they were on that stage. Some of them risking, there was one young man who's told me, if my government knew that I was here, they would come here after me. There was an Iranian activist and a woman who, there was an Iranian activist and a woman who was both French and Moroccan, who had survived the attack on the Charlie Hebdo offices in Paris. I guess it was 7 years ago. And she survived because she didn't go to the office that day, but all of her colleagues were killed. There's a fatwa against her. There were 2 women who had to have bodyguards at all times because of the assassination attempts that had been made on their lives. So You know, when we hear these stories or even just watch the news, it can be so overwhelming. Honestly, it can just be, it can be very overwhelming. And this is where the mindfulness and compassion practices allow us to persevere and to protect our hearts and to be willing to bear witness to some of these things, because we do have the capacity for connection and solidarity. And all of the activists who took that stage, what was most important to them is, and that's why I'm telling you all these things, is to raise awareness of the issues that they face, to raise awareness of the real situation in these countries. That, for example, there is no civil war in Syria. There is an oppressive regime fighting with its own citizens, for example. And they really don't want to be forgotten, because that's, so many of them were released from prison because people didn't forget them and called for their release. And I guess, oh, here goes the light. We'll bring it back up. And any of you, I guess, who've written letters for Amnesty International or done anything like that, you know all about this. Okay, bear with me for a moment. Reattach it. Okay, that was pretty good. Stay up a little longer this time. Okay, we'll see. So they understand that being remembered and not forgotten is a protection for them. And of course, it's a protection for us too, because these are people who are really on the front lines, for freedom and justice in our world. And I think they really loved learning the practices that we shared with them, even just briefly. And I told them that when I worked in the Darfuri refugee camp in 2016, I was really dubious. Like, in the hierarchy of human needs, when you're in a place where people are hungry, they don't have enough food, they don't have medical care, who's going to want to practice mindfulness? Like, how important is that? And then it turned out that the refugees, of all the leadership trainings and things that we were offering for them to support their refugee-led programs through IACT, the anti-genocide group that Inside LA works with, that they loved the mindfulness practices the most, because it helped them steady their hearts. It helped them stay present with experience. It helped them remind themselves when they're having a flashback to their trauma, all of them so traumatized, that they're here now. It's not the past, that they may not be totally safe, but they're certainly a lot safer than when they were in Darfur. And I want to say that, it's hard to believe, because Tuesday is International Refugees Day. And it's hard for me to believe that on the 20th anniversary of the Darfur genocide, it is happening again. It's happening again in Sudan. And I feel so, how do we hold that in our hearts? And again, don't think that Sudan is having a civil war either. Sudan is not having a civil war. Sudan is having a war between two generals who are each fighting to be dictators of South Sudan. South Sudan enjoyed a few years of relative freedom and justice where good things were happening. Anyway, I just want you to know that. So I want to remember right now my beloved friends, Katie J. and Gabriel Storing, the founders and directors of IACT, who were killed in a car accident, so tragically and ironically, a couple years ago. And And I want to share some of Gabriel's words because I think they're really helpful in terms of how do we hold all this in our hearts? How do we bear witness? How can we bear to bear witness to these things? And yet it's so important that we do stand in solidarity and not forget each other. And so Gabriel said, and I care about this. I personally need this right now with this horrific renewed violence in Darfur. He said, keep it personal. Focus on individual people. Focus on relationships that you have with people, like the refugees or whoever it might be. Feel joy. There is always an experience. He says there's always an experience. There's always a possibility of experiencing joy. And I felt that in the refugee camps, that there was so much joy, children playing with each other, parents loving their children, happy that we were there. So many chances to experience joy and laughter. Hope is essential. He says, double down on it. Never underestimate the power of hope. Go on walks. Take time for movement during the day, no matter how busy you feel. Never stop asking ourselves, what if? Which is another way of saying things don't have to be this way. Things can be different. Plant many seeds. Love deeply. Trust. Listen. Be mindful. He was a big mindfulness practitioner after meeting me and the other Inside LA teachers who have gone to work with the refugees. Go on walks, take time for movement during the day, no matter how busy you feel. Never stop asking yourself, what if? Trust, listen, be mindful, love deeply, give hugs, and have fun. He says play soccer, but that's because he loved playing soccer. I personally don't play soccer, but going for walks, meditating, moving my body, even if I don't feel like it, having fun, laughing, these are things we can all do and support each other to do. So yes, please remember Darfur and South Sudan on Tuesday. There were already about 300,000 refugees clustered in 12 different camps along the border with Sudan in Chad. And there have already been that number, 300,000 people pouring over the border into Chad, where there really isn't. I mean, it's sub-Saharan subsistence economy Africa. I just don't know what's going to happen. But I think for us, it's just really important to remember that these are families. These are mothers and fathers and aunts and uncles and kids and, just like us. They're families that are fleeing for their lives. And there are ways that we can support people. We can volunteer, we can donate something. I mean, there's always ways that we can support in very small ways. Most of us, I am not going to be sort of out there activist in that way, but there's so many other ways that we can share what we love and help. And just as some of you have been willing to share your love and appreciation for the practice by volunteering to moderate, for Inside LA, that's a way to support what you love. And I think it's also good to see how the oppression has come into us. And one of the things I said to Jack is, I really realized when we were at the conference, I really realized that I've gotten kind of lazy about my awareness with the news. Like, I'll read some headlines and not read the articles. I'll read mainstream media that does not tell some of the stories that need to be told, instead of reading some other things like The Intercept or Mother Jones, or, other outlets, alternative news to mainstream news, so that I'm not only reading propaganda from our country, but really holding multiple perspectives in my mind and heart. So seeing ways that the oppression has maybe come into us, internalized oppression, if you're from a marginalized group, or internalized self-doubt, if you were raised as a woman in the past. I don't know how it is today. I hope it's better. But just appreciating, how are we carrying ourselves, and how does our mindfulness and compassion practice help us hold all of this in our hearts. What does our practice ask you, or ask us, to overcome in ourselves? That's another question. And just to reflect for a moment on one issue that particularly bothers you in the world. For me, back in 2016, which almost seems like an innocent time now, refugees was an issue that really bothered me. So, I needed to find a way to do something about that. But then if you think of an issue that's bothering you a lot in the world, I mean, if you could pick one, I know there's so many, and then just ask yourself, what would be a possible first step in doing something about it? Because that's the antidote to despair. And it really brings hope to feel that you're doing something. A great activist, Daniel Ellsberg, passed away. And you may remember, some of you may be too young, of course, to remember that the Pentagon Papers, and that he is the one who exposed the government's, all things that the government had written about the war in Vietnam, that, sad to say, showed us that our government had lied to us about a lot of things. He was asked, he was 92 when he died recently, and he was asked, how do you feel about your work? He also did a lot of anti-nuclear work, given where the world is today, in a very dangerous place. And he said, this is not the world I would have hoped to see in 2023, but I am filled with joy and gratitude for what I stood for and worked toward in this life. I thought that was really beautiful, and I felt inspired by it. And as for the joy, I want to quote from André Gide, a great French author of the 19th century, early 20th century. Know that joy is rarer, more difficult, and more beautiful than sadness, he says. Once you make this all-important discovery, you must embrace joy as a moral obligation. That's a moral obligation that I feel good about embracing. And by the way, the activists love to dance. Oh my gosh, they really love to dance. So once again, when the world feels really overwhelming, we can turn to the Peace of Wild Things, as Wendell Berry, the poet, suggests. We can do the smallest thing, like donating a little bit, volunteering a little bit. But when we do these kinds of things consciously, our consciousness comes alive with compassion, and that brings joy and the ability to support and inspire each other. So this is what I wanted to share with you this evening. And I know it's not evening for many of you, but you can see from the light in my room here, our room, that it's evening now. Okay, so somebody is very objecting to my talking about these things in a way here, and really wishes that Jack was here transmitting love more than me. So I'm very sorry that Jack is not here, because clearly you feel his transmission of love very deeply, and I'm happy for that. We express our love in different ways in this life. And for me, this is something that for me is an expression of my love for the world. And we all have our ways of expressing love and our different opinions about the things that I'm sharing. But you have to understand, or I want you to please understand, that I am coming from almost a week of working at this conference. My heart is very full with all of it. And so that's what I am sharing with all of you tonight. And I think that that's all I'll say for now. But it is your turn to speak up, so I encourage you to do that either in the chat or with your raised hand, like Sherry. You can raise your hand with the reaction button down at the bottom of the screen. And again, I share these things with you with the sense of how do we hold all of this together as humans in this life. I think that's a really big question for all of us. I really welcome all of you and love you for practicing together. I really, truly do. And so it's time now to say bye for now. Check the website. I really don't know our timing for next week, because remember, it's nighttime here. So I have a feeling that I'm going to be traveling, but there's always a good teacher. If it's not me, there's always a good teacher. And if it's not me next week, it'll be me the week after. So thank you so much, everybody. And if you want to stay for breakout group, which I totally encourage you to do, it's a great way to continue to talk about your practice in a smaller group together, get to know each other and stuff. Don't turn off your Zoom. Just, don't turn off your Zoom. Just hang in there for about 10 minutes to have whatever bio break or whatever you might need. And thank you again. Love you all. Bye.
Thank you, Trudy.
Dedicate the merit?
Oh, I forgot.
It's like, hold on.
Hi, everyone. I'm having internet issues, so we'll come back in 10 minutes, and then we can do the breakout groups.
All right,
yeah, don't hang up. I wasn't able.
Anissa, don't worry. We will dedicate the merit, and people will hang in there and wait. I'm just in such a different circumstance. I'm so sorry. I completely forgot. So don't worry about how you get into your breakout group. Zoom does it automatically. So this is not some hot sociometric exercise of who's friends with who or whatever. Zoom just puts you in a breakout group. It's not a personal thing. So, and you are not recorded in your breakout groups. You can say anything you want. I will not be able to ever hear you. So you can say whatever you want. So let's just take a moment to meditate. It's going to be a quick moment because we've gone over time and I respect your time. So just taking a moment to sit together. At the end of a period of study and practice together, we always, and I thank you for reminding me, because we always take a moment to express our gratitude and appreciation for the chance to practice these teachings of wisdom and compassion. And the way that we express our gratitude is by offering the goodness of our practice to all beings everywhere without exception. May we and all beings grow in love and understanding and work together toward a more peaceful and just world. Ding. Thank you, everybody.